Café Sirene always smelled like burnt sugar and tired hope, the kind of place that survived solely on the caffeine dependency of Manhattan's financial district, and Evelyn knew every chipped cup and every worn spot on the counter, having worked double shifts here for the last 4 years, desperately trying to stitch together enough tips to cover the engineering tuition she wanted to start. It was 7:30 a.m. on a tense Tuesday, September 12th, a date that would eventually be studied and re-examined by business historians, when the man walked in, a figure of polished titanium and controlled speed, who seemed to displace the very air around him. This wasn't the usual stressed-out junior analyst. This was Julian Vance, the CEO of Apex Global, a tech conglomerate currently locked in a tense, high-stakes negotiation for a $30 billion hostile takeover that was dominating every financial headline. Vance ordered a simple black coffee, his eyes still glued to the screen of his custom-made satellite phone, every line of his expensive, perfectly tailored suit screaming money and effortless power, a stark contrast to Evelyn's stained apron and aching feet. And he wasn't even meant to be in this humble cafe. A minor traffic accident had forced his driver to take a detour, a tiny unplanned glitch in the matrix of his controlled life that would ripple outward with catastrophic potential. As Vance reached for the ceramic mug, momentarily distracted by a terse message buzzing across his screen about the impending deadline for the takeover bid, his large, worn leather wallet, the kind that looked more like a small, highly secure document holder than a billfold, slipped silently from the inner breast pocket of his jacket, hitting the worn oak floor with a soft, almost imperceptible thud beneath the constant din of the espresso machine, rolling just under the edge of the adjacent empty table. Julian Vance took his coffee, gave a quick impersonal nod that didn't quite meet Evelyn's eyes, and was out the door and back into his waiting town car within 90 seconds, utterly oblivious to the critical, highly sensitive cargo he had just left behind in the chaotic scramble of his morning. Evelyn, wiping down the counter moments later in a practiced, mechanical motion, saw the dark, expensive leather glinting under the table light, an object completely foreign and out of place in the humble setting of Café Sirene, and when she reached for it, she immediately registered its unusual weight and the metallic clink from inside. The sheer presence of the item immediately ratcheted the tension in the room for her to an almost unbearable level, even though no one else in the morning rush had noticed the drop, setting the stage for a dramatic split-second decision that would redefine her future. She glanced at the clock. 7:34 a.m., barely 4 minutes since he walked in and left, yet the world had already irrevocably shifted, and she knew instinctively that this was no ordinary lost item. This was a problem, a serious, potentially company-altering problem belonging to a man who controlled vast financial empires, and now it was sitting in her hands demanding immediate high-stakes action. Evelyn picked up the wallet, feeling the heavy, supple texture of the high-end Italian leather, which seemed to hum with an unearned significance, and she knew, even before she opened it, that the contents were worth more than the entire gross revenue of Café Sirene for a year, forcing her mind into a dynamic, rapid-fire assessment of her next move. The moment she flipped it open, the sheer gravity of what Julian Vance had lost hit her with the force of a physical blow, demanding that we, as observers, take a closer look at what was revealed inside the dark, luxurious folds. There was, of course, a substantial stack of crisp $100 bills, certainly enough to pay off Evelyn's outstanding debts and fund her first year of college, a shocking fact that ignited a brief, almost agonizing flare of temptation that she instantly suppressed. But the money was the least of it. What mattered were the items that screamed power and access. Tucked into a zippered compartment was a platinum-edged corporate card, the kind with no spending limit, a New York driver's license confirming the identity of Julian Vance, and most critically, a unique black metallic keycard embedded with a visible microchip, labeled cryptically with the letters APX77 and a series of complex randomized numbers. This APX77 card was the open loop, raising an immediate and unanswered question: what exactly did this key unlock? Evelyn instantly recognized the logo embossed on the card, a stylized, futuristic letter A. It was the symbol for Apex Global, the multi-billion-dollar firm Vance ran, and the complexity of the security features, suggested it was not for a simple office door, but perhaps for a server room or a secure data center, or even, given the high-stakes takeover mentioned in the morning news cycle, something related to highly confidential financial strategy. Evelyn quickly snapped the wallet shut, her heart now pounding in a rhythmic use of tension against her ribs, realizing that the clock was still ticking, and Vance was likely halfway across the city, unaware of the crisis he faced, while she, a 23-year-old waitress making minimum wage, held the fate of a major corporate deal or worse, a security breach in her hands. Her immediate ingrained reaction was simple: honesty, the kind of reflexive integrity that came from a lifetime of doing the right thing. But the reality was far more complicated than a simple cash return. Julian Vance was a ghost now, already in transit, and calling the police would mean handing over the sensitive APX-77 key to an anonymous desk sergeant, a risk she felt was too great, given the item's obvious importance. She decided in a matter-of-fact delivery that she would have to bypass the usual channel, that this demanding situation required direct, extraordinary action to ensure the wallet and its high-stakes contents were returned immediately and securely, a risky personal commitment that dramatically shifted the narrative. From a simple story of honesty to an unexpected investigative digression, she quickly retrieved her meager savings from her locker, a total of $27, which she knew she would need for cab fare, realizing this unplanned mission would cost her both money and the entire morning's wages. But the weight of the APX-77 key in her apron pocket was already heavier than any potential tip, compelling her forward into the unknown. The immediate problem, a sudden action moment that stalled Evelyn's initial rush, was not just finding a way to contact Julian Vance, but the highly necessary requirement of proving the wallet's security had not been compromised before its return, a critical detail that gave her investigation a documentary-style progression. Evelyn left her shift early, apologizing vaguely to her bewildered manager, with a nervous energy that belied her usual calm, and she stood outside Café serene, clutching the heavy, complex wallet, and knowing that a simple phone call to the Apex Global switchboard would only lead to a frustrating, dead-end interaction with an impersonal assistant who would likely dismiss her as a nuisance. She used the simple tools at her disposal, namely her aging smartphone and the public internet, to launch a dynamic shift in pacing, moving from the slow, descriptive pace of the cafe to a rapid-fire action sequence of digital investigation. First, she cross-referenced Julian Vance's driver's license photo with public images on financial news sites, quickly confirming the identity of the man who had been in the cafe only minutes earlier, grounding the event in specific, verified facts. Next, she focused on the unique, mysterious APX-77 keycard, searching for any publicly available information related to that specific altimerimet designation and the Apex Global logo, a process that initially yielded nothing but confusing corporate jargon and encrypted security protocols. Then came the breakthrough, a deep dive into an obscure forum frequented by IT security specialists, where she found a brief, heavily redacted mention of the APX-77 protocol, described as the Tier 1 physical access key to Apex Global's primary data center, the very nerve center that housed all the sensitive data for the massive $30 billion hostile takeover that was the subject of the day's tense financial news. This shocking fact solidified the gravity of the situation, making it abundantly clear that she could not simply drop this wallet in a mailbox. The security risk was too immense, and the information she had just uncovered necessitated a private personal handoff directly to Vance himself or his highest-ranking, most trusted security officer. Evelyn, despite her desperate financial situation, knew she had to spend her limited savings to ensure this security was maintained, a matter-of-fact delivery of her moral code that drove her next highly audacious decision. She hailed a cab, using the last of her cash for the ride, and provided the driver with the single destination that mattered, the imposing 60-story glass tower that served as the global headquarters of Apex Global, located deep within the unforgiving steel canyon of Midtown Manhattan. As the cab sped away, she gave the wallet one final serious look, the juxtaposition of her threadbare life with the immense power in her hands, creating a moment of intense, compelling tension knowing this was her last chance to turn back. But the weight of the security key was already pulling her toward the dramatic, necessary confrontation. The Apex Global headquarters was a cathedral of glass and steel, a visually cue-prompting structure that made the tiny, familiar warmth of Café Serene feel like it existed on another planet entirely, and Evelyn stepped out of the cab and onto the polished granite plaza, immediately feeling the oppressive weight of corporate power, a severe transition marked by the chilling, air-conditioned silence of the lobby, which was dominated by a 3-story digital display showing the Apex Global stock price ticking relentlessly upwards. The receptionist, a woman with a perfectly maintained demeanor and an earpiece that suggested immediate, high-level access, met Evelyn's approach with an expressionless, controlled gaze, the initial rejection already written in the crisp fold of her suit jacket, forcing Evelyn to initiate the suspenseful build-up of her dramatic entry. Evelyn presented the wallet, offering a clear and simple phrasing, "I need to return this to Julian Vance. It's urgent, highly sensitive, and contains the APX-77. The mention of the APX-77 designation, a specific date and place grounding the event in corporate reality, caused a flicker of genuine surprise behind the receptionist's practiced calm, but her training quickly reasserted control, and she delivered the immediate icy dismissal. "Mr. Vance is in a closed-door meeting regarding the merger, and cannot be interrupted. You may leave the item with security, and he will be notified in due course," a completely unacceptable solution for Evelyn, given her knowledge of the key's critical importance and the necessity of a secure handoff. The receptionist tried to buzz security, escalating the situation into a tense, rapid-fire action moment, but Evelyn, relying on instinct and a brief moment of cinematic build-up, placed her hand firmly on the polished marble counter and spoke with an unexpected authority, making direct engagement with the unseen power structure. "You don't understand the security implication. The APX-77 key is required for the system audit that starts at noon today, regarding the hostile takeover, and leaving it unsecured compromises everything. Either you contact his security detail, or I will use the credentials on his platinum card to call the emergency line myself." A powerful piece of rhetorical phrasing that leveraged the information she had discovered online. The reception, visibly rattled by Evelyn's specific fact-heavy knowledge of the corporate deadline, realized this was not a simple public nuisance, and after a tense 5-second pause that felt like an hour, the receptionist made a hurried, hushed call, directing Evelyn not to Vance, but to a mid-level security director named Marcus Thorne, thus creating a necessary bottleneck. Marcus Thorne, a man who looked perpetually stressed and wore his suspicion like a visible badge, finally appeared, directing Evelyn to a small meeting room where the inevitable confrontation was clearly about to unfold, setting the stage for the next dramatic escalation and allowing the narrator to guide the viewer through the next stage of events. Marcus Thorne, the security director, entered the small, windowless meeting room with a wary, protective posture, his mind clearly working through scenarios of disgruntled employees and elaborate scams, and he approached Evelyn, not as a Samaritan, but as a potential threat, his first question, a matter-of-fact delivery designed to disarm her. "What exactly is your ask here?" "Mr. Vance is extremely busy," immediately establishing a misunderstanding that Evelyn needed to dismantle with speed and absolute clarity. Evelyn, however, did not immediately present the wallet. Instead, she used a suspenseful build-up, placing the heavy, expensive item on the table between them, slightly out of his reach, and then looked Thorne directly in the eye, maintaining a simple, clear phrasing. "My ask is that this wallet is returned uncompromised, and that Julian Vance knows I had the APX-77 key in my possession for 3 hours, and made a choice to deliver it to him personally, bypassing all general channels." The specificity of the APX-77 key, coupled with her bold, almost challenging statement about the possession time, finally created the necessary pause in Thorne's aggressive questioning, forcing him to consider the gravity of the situation that she, the insignificant waitress, had somehow managed to protect. She then opened the wallet, not to show the cash, but to point to the secure black key card, making a direct address to the security chief. This is the Tier 1 access key to your primary data center. A simple phone call or a trip to a police station would have exposed this item to half the city. I spent my last $27 on a cab ride to ensure its integrity and deliver it to an authorized contact. As she spoke, the reality of the situation began to hit Thorne. The juxtaposition of Evelyn's threadbare jacket and the multi-billion-dollar piece of plastic becoming intensely evident, and he quickly used his internal communication to contact Vance's personal assistant, demanding an immediate update on the CEO's availability. Though he still did not fully trust the situation, he finally reached a highly stressed Julian Vance, who was at that precise moment panicking over the realization that the APX77 key needed to initiate the final digital audit for the $30 billion hostile takeover was missing, creating a sudden action moment on the CEO's end. The message Thorne delivered was short and sharp, an example of short and snappy phrasing. "Sir, your wallet is here." The waitress who found it insists on a direct handoff because she knows what the APX77 key is. She has had it for 3 hours. She brought it here personally. The impact of that last sentence was explosive, completely shattering Vance's intense focus on the merger documents and causing him to immediately abandon his meeting, realizing that a potentially disastrous corporate espionage event had just been averted by improbable luck and the extraordinary action of a woman he had seen for less than 90 seconds. To fully appreciate the cinematic build-up and the dramatic intensity of Julian Vance's abrupt exit from the high-level merger meeting, we need to take a look at what was happening behind the scenes at Apex Global, shifting the point of view to an investigative digression focused entirely on the CEO's immediate context. This particular Tuesday, September 12th, was not just any day, it was the culminating moment of an 8-month-long, ruthlessly aggressive, $30 billion style takeover of a rival technology firm, a complex high-stakes maneuver that required total secrecy, flawless execution, and most crucially, a specific tamper-proof system audit scheduled for noon to lock in the final stock purchase agreements. The APX77 keycard, the very item Evelyn was now guarding, was not just an access pass. It contained the core encryption token required to initiate that mandatory, non-negotiable audit, a detail that provided a crucial fact-heavy context to the entire event. Vance, already operating on 2 hours of sleep and fueled by the raw tension of the impending deadline, had been completely oblivious to the dropped wallet until his personal assistant in the middle of the meeting quietly slipped him a note indicating a security alert was imminent, prompting Vance to check his inner pocket, only to feel the horrifying empty silence of missing leather. The realization was a shocking fact. Without that specific key, the audit could not proceed, the deal would be stalled, and due to a highly aggressive counterbid from a competitor, even a 1-hour delay could cause the entire takeover to collapse, potentially costing Apex Global and its shareholders billions, making the whole situation a powerful juxtaposition of calm detail with sudden corporate chaos. Vance, known for his methodical and often cold nature, was rarely seen without complete control, but in that moment he was operating on pure adrenaline and panic, imagining the worst-case scenario, a corporate spy or a thief having access to his secure digital tokens and personal information, turning the potential multi-billion-dollar win into an immediate, irreversible loss. The message from Marcus Thorne announcing the wallet's return and Evelyn's specific knowledge of the APX77 key, therefore did not land as a simple notification of a found item. It was a suddenly miraculous rescue from the precipice of financial ruin, establishing a debt far greater than any amount of cash could ever repay. He realized the integrity of this unknown woman had not just returned his billfold, she had protected the integrity of a massive financial operation, a crucial distinction that was immediately clear to him and drove his subsequent highly unusual course of action, allowing the narrative to guide the audience through the CEO's emotional shift from panic to profound, tense gratitude. Julian Vance entered the small meeting room with a controlled but palpable intensity, moving quickly but with an almost predatory focus, and he looked at Evelyn, not with the impersonal glance of the café, but with a deep, analytical stare that evaluated her integrity, determination and unexpected resourcefulness. Seeing not a waitress, but a single point of highly effective, self-directed action. He did not waste time with pleasantries or prolonged thanks, instead using short and snappy sentences to cut directly to the core of the exchange. The APX77 key is secure. You understood its value and you protected it. Why didn't you just leave it with the lobby security? Evelyn responded with the same simple clarity she had used with Thorne, her voice steady, despite the overwhelming presence of the CEO. Sir, I searched the key online. I know it's for the primary data center. My job was not just to return the item, but to ensure the security it represented wasn't breached. Dropping it at the front desk was a breach. It was the only way to be certain. This clear, simple phrasing, this matter-of-fact delivery of her moral and logistical rationale, immediately confirmed to Vance that Evelyn possessed a critical skill set that Apex Global desperately required: operational integrity combined with investigative problem-solving, the very attributes he trusted least in his own highly paid staff. He walked over to the table, picked up the wallet, and then did something highly unexpected. Avoiding the predictable scene of a simple cash reward, he didn't reach for his cash. Instead, he made direct engagement with her reality. I know where you work, Evelyn. I know what you I also know you spent 3 hours making the right decision under pressure, solving a multi-billion-dollar problem for me, and you demonstrated more discretion and initiative than any of my highly paid security consultants did. He then made the offer, creating the defining moment that marked the chronological progression toward resolution. I'm not going to insult your integrity with a check for $5,000. I need people who can think like you, who understand discretion and consequence. I'm offering you an entry-level analyst position in my corporate operations division starting next week. No experience required, just the character you showed today. It pays $70,000 a year, plus full benefits, and it starts with you learning the data security systems you just say. The sudden, dramatic action moment of the offer hung in the air, a life-altering opportunity that completely blindsided Evelyn, who had expected a modest reward at most, forcing her to process the juxtaposition of her current reality and the unimaginable future he had just laid out on the sterile conference table, a true cliffhanger beat before the final resolution. The sheer scale of Julian Vance's offer, a $70,000 salary, a full-time professional career, and the abrupt end to her life of double shifts and chronic financial anxiety, left Evelyn momentarily stunned, creating a pause for emphasis in the generally fast-paced narrative. But her innate, decisive nature quickly reasserted itself, moving the story toward the final, resolute conclusion. She took a deep breath, looked at the CEO, and accepted the offer with a simple, firm nod, her only response being a clear, focused question: what time do I need to be here on Monday? The speed of her acceptance impressed Vance, confirming his initial dramatic assessment of her character, and he provided her with his personal assistant's card, instructing her to resign from the Café immediately and prepare for a steep but rewarding learning curve, thus marking the final transition from the waitressing uniform to the world of corporate operations. Evelyn, following a final tense exit from the imposing glass tower, went directly back to Café Serene, handed in her apron, and gave her 2 weeks' notice. But the story of her extraordinary action and the CEO's highly unusual response did not stay secret for long, leaking out through the corporate security director to the operations team, where it immediately became a powerful, compelling, and repeatable anecdote about integrity and meritocracy within the often cynical walls of Apex Global. In the immediate aftermath, Evelyn used her first few paychecks to pay off her debts and enroll in night classes for data security, quickly distinguishing herself in her new role by applying her real-world problem-solving skills to complex security logistics, demonstrating that Vance's gamble on character over traditional qualifications had paid off spectacularly. Years later, Evelyn would be an instrumental, well-respected member of the Apex Global team, no longer serving coffee, but helping to make multi-billion-dollar decisions, and while she never forgot the smell of burnt sugar and tired hope, she knew that the single silent thud of a rich man's wallet hitting a worn cafe floor on a stressed Tuesday morning had been the sudden, unpredictable action moment that provided her with the crucial career-defining pivot point she needed. The chance encounter had provided a dramatic, chronological, and unexpected reward for absolute honesty, proving that sometimes the greatest treasures are found not in the contents of a wallet, but in the character of the person who returns it.